make a video about why, to this day, after the time in history when it was founded, we still need communism. All those morons saying that communism is the same as welfare, you can go leave because you are just an absolute moron. Just look up the definition of that. I'm sorry I got a little heated.
What's going on, everyone? Jeremy here from The Quartering, and I can't believe I missed this.
How dare you?
I can't believe that I missed this story. I am so angry with myself because it would have been an absolute goldmine. However, huge shout out to this video's sponsor, and perhaps one of the easiest ones I've ever had to do, and that's for the Ridge wallet. Now, I used to carry around the old school trifold wallet, jam-packed with all sorts of receipts and garbage I didn't need. And then I moved to the Ridge wallet, their front pocket style, 30,000 5-star reviewed wallet. They're some of the coolest wallet designs you're ever going to see. Seriously, every time I break this thing out, people are asking me about it. Most of my family members have already moved over to the Ridge wallet. Now, it took a few days to get used to not having a billfold in my back pocket, which, by the way, helped make my back feel a ton better. And now I'm loving it. There's a lifetime warranty on them if you love it, and free returns if you don't. Below, you'll find a unique URL where you can score a 10% discount on your Ridge wallet. Great for you, or a great gift idea. Pick up your Ridge wallet, save 10% today, and help support the channel. It's kind of a story that doesn't really depend on timing. It's a story that we've been covering on this channel for almost a year now. Crazy communist game developers who have no idea what they're talking about. Now, not that long ago, a few weeks ago, the Video Game Awards happened, in which Disco Elysium won a significant number of awards. I think 3 or 4. And I was watching at the time. I couldn't really understand what they were saying in their victory speech, but later an article came out on Kotaku that transcribed it, and yikes. All right? The article is titled, Disco Elysium Developers Shout Out Marx and Engels, that's Karl Marx, by the way, in a Game Awards victory speech. During the speech for their second win of the night, the team behind Disco Elysium, gave a special thanks to Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, the authors of, that's right, the Communist Manifesto. In this acceptance speech for the Fresh Indie Game Award, Helen said that the team would like to thank some of the great people that came before us. The people they shouted out included the architects of the communist thought, Marx and Engels, as well as a Russian painter, Vladimir Markovsky, and Viktor Tsoi, a Soviet singer and songwriter. If you've played Disco Elysium, which features the vocal talents of members of the socialist podcast Chapo Trap House, you may not be surprised by these references. If not, and here we go, I encourage you to read the Communist Manifesto, which is about how a ghost called communism is haunting Europe. It's pretty radical. So Kotaku telling people out here to read the Communist Manifesto. Big brain move. And we're going to get to the comment section in a minute because it is an absolute gold mine. But just to give you an idea who Karl Marx really was and what the outcomes of his line of thinking are, let me share with you an article from USA Today, which I guess honored in a way the 200th birthday of Karl Marx, titled, Don't Celebrate Karl Marx, His Communism Has a Death Count in the Millions. Saturday marks 200 years since the birth of Karl Marx, and tributes are arising around the globe. In the New York Times tribute titled, Happy Birthday, Karl Marx, You Were Right, philosophy professor Jason Barker declared that the educated liberal opinion is today more or less unanimous in its agreement with Marx's basic thesis on the flaws of capitalism. But this is true only if, quote, educated liberal opinion simply does not care about tyranny. But Marxism in practice didn't work out so well. Communist regimes produced the greatest ideological carnage in human history. Let me read that sentence again for those kids in the back. Communist regimes produced the greatest ideological carnage in human history, ending more than 100 million people in the last century, by the way. While some apologists claim it is unfair to blame Marx for this, the seeds of tyranny were there from the start. Marx's salvation scheme was built on a mystical foundation supplied by German philosopher G.W.F. Hegel. Through the New York Times eulogy for Marx, touted Hegel as an advocate of the rational liberal state. Hegel was derided in his lifetime as the Royal Prussian court philosopher and for promoting the notion that the state is inherently rational. Hegel defied government, asserting that the state is the divine idea as it exists on earth. Marx, perhaps blinded by him, never recognized the inherent danger of Leviathan, nor did Marx explain how communism would actually arise after the demolition of capitalism. Equally important, he never even attempted to reveal how the state would wither away after the dictatorship of the proletariat commenced. Marx's humanitarian piffle did nothing to deter Lenin from decreeing that, quote, liberty is so precious that it must be rationed. Marxists assume that vastly increasing government power was the key to liberating humanity. Glorifying command and control was the flip side of demonizing prices and profits. But all-powerful regimes quickly became ends in themselves. In 1932, Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin decreed that the death penalty for any theft of state property, as millions of Ukrainians were starving due to the brutal collectivization of farms. Even children poaching a few ears of corn would be ended. Marx continued to appeal to social justice warriors thanks to axioms such as from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. And who determines need? The presumably omniscient benevolent state. Marxism promised to end the class struggle, but did so by subjecting everyone to officialdom. Abolishing private property left people hostage to petty government officials who punished anyone who failed to kowtow to the latest dictates. Does this sound like anybody you might know in modern era? Does this sound like somebody that might have a blue check mark in their Twitter handle? Does this sound like somebody who may have brightly colored hair to you? Marxist regimes felt entitled to inflict unlimited delusions on their victims for good of the people, or at least the proletariats. East Germans were told that Berlin Wall existed to keep fascists out, even though all the endings by border guards involved East Germans heading west. Marxism promised a utopia, and that unsecured pledge sufficed to treat subjects like serfs bound to endlessly submit and obey. Anyone who tried to escape was treated as if they were stealing government property. Communism is still often portrayed as morally superior to capitalism because it banishes greedy corporations, poisoning people for profit. But the East Bloc regimes became a vast graveyard for Mother Nature. Pollution was pervasively, largely due to the defecation of economic plans. And long as the factory's wood and steel output rose, it didn't matter if people and everything else were perishing. I traveled behind the Iron Curtain many times in the mid-1980s to study firsthand the results of Marx's philosophy. I saw pervasive fear in the faces of emaciated people on the streets of Bucharest, Romania. I saw the terror in the eyes of young Czechs when anyone touched on the subject of politics. I experienced border guards who flew into a tizzy at any piece of paper that might contain subversive ideas. And I witnessed legions of Western apologists who always insisted on giving the communist regimes more time and more Western handouts to redeem themselves. This is a common argument of people who are pro-communism. This time it's going to be different. This time it's going to be better. Except it's never been better. It's never worked. And we have modern day examples of its failures. And yet people would expect you to ignore that and simply continue to consume and obey their plans, because it is a means to control not only the people's motions and activities, but their minds as well. This is true fascism. We have piles and piles of bodies, hundreds of millions, yet there are still modern day people who would call themselves a Marxist, because this time it's going to be different, because giving the government and all their genius unlimited power over the citizens is supposedly going to be better this time around. Just listen and obey. The article finishes, Marx never intended for his doctrines to spur perpetual dread in hundreds of millions of victims, but it was criminally naive to expect happy results from any system that bestowed boundless powers on rulers. On Marx's birthday, never forget that a philosophy that begins by idealizing government will end by idealizing subjugation. If you look at the comments on this article of where Kotaku is essentially advertising to read the Communist Manifesto, you'll see all sorts of hilarity. One commenter reads, "In a rational world, the valued outcome would be as much as intent. This would be greeted as the equivalent of shouting, 'Heil.' I don't care how well-intentioned you think communism is on paper. It's a weapon of mass economic and spiritual destruction. That said, there is a 99% possibility that people who run this site will have me shadow banned, sure." I mean, there are a lot of spicy comments. Now, Marx himself isn't necessarily responsible for the actions of those that followed him or his beliefs. But the main takeaway here is we know what will happen. We know that there are communist disasters happening right now where they have to eat the animals in their zoo because there's no food. And Kotaku is promoting that. Great video game coverage, Kotaku. Hope to see more of it. Hope you enjoyed this video. We'll talk to you again real soon.